This podcast and content posted by Dr. Judith Joseph is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast or website is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional diagnoses or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.
Hello, I'm so grateful that you chose to listen to this podcast. I'm Dr. Judith, a board-certified psychiatrist and researcher. And on this podcast, you will hear from world-renowned experts. At the end of every single podcast of The Vault, every expert talks about a time in their lives when they were struggling and no one knew it. And they talk about what they used to get through that struggle. So make sure you listen through till the end and you subscribe and share with a friend.
Cody Rigsby is a renowned fitness coach and director of cycling content at Peloton. He is a New York Times bestselling author of XOXO Cody and second runner-up on the 30th season of Dancing with the Stars. Cody has been the face of major brands, and he's carved out a niche for himself in the romance and relationship space as a self-love enthusiast and motivational speaker. His podcast with Andrew Chappelle, Tactfully Petty, offers relatable relationship advice. I love the work that you do in the space of love. And tell me about some of the most challenging questions that you get asked by your followers about love.
Wow. I always kind of just approach it from someone who's lived life and failed at love so that I can take my failures and like share them or give my perspective, because I've been in the trenches of being someone who's been in multiple, long-term relationships and dated in New York City. And it's just, there's a lot there. I feel like it always does come into that idea of self-love, because I feel like that's the foundation of a good partner, and a good partnership are two people that love themselves first and foremost. I always feel like that's a big one. I'm sure you receive that a lot.
Yes, confidence is important. I met Cody at a Meta event celebrating David Beckham's new brand, and we hit it off right away. Cody joins me on The Vault to discuss relationship advice, and we filmed hilarious content, as well as discussed my new book, High Functioning. Cody discussed how he too struggles at times, yet no one knows because, like many of us, he wears a mask of productivity.
To be vulnerable, I feel like I'm feeling a little bit of this right now. The past month has been like hard on me for, I don't know why, to be honest. When I really felt this the hardest was probably the winter that I'd just gotten done with doing Dancing with the Stars.
We talked about how people can better understand their hidden struggles so that they can reclaim joy and have healthier relationships.
10 things we wish we knew in our 20s, Love Edition.
If they love their mama that much.
It's okay to be a hoe.
If their ex is crazy, they can't take responsibility.
Ooh, it's okay not to be a hoe. Settle down. Calm down. Spend the night alone, babe.
If they've never been to therapy, be careful.
It's okay when relationships end, and not all relationships are meant to last a lifetime. Some are just a season, and that's okay.
If your mama don't like them, your family don't like them, your friends don't like them, watch out.
Don't tell someone that you love them for the first time when intoxicated.
Don't commit when you're intoxicated.
Before you can win over their heart, you need to win over their friends.
Cody, thank you for coming into The Vault today.
It's so nice to be here in The Vault. I'm just impressed you were strong enough to open that door. That's a heavy door.
It's heavy.
It is heavy.
I had to make the person who designed this space promise that we could not get locked in, because I'm afraid of that.
It did cross my mind before we entered, and you said it doesn't lock, so it made me feel a little bit more secure.
Well, I met you just a couple of weeks ago.
And
your energy was so good. I was like, this is a good person.
Likewise. We hit it off.
In the vault, so yes.
It's like one of those New York moments where you end up in the same place at the same time and you never know. Because you know how that goes. It's like, actually on the way here, I ran into somebody on the subway that I barely know. And like, they did give me do you want me to leave you alone? I was like, no, it's okay. But I wish more people would ask that when you run into them randomly on the subway. Like, hey, how are you? We don't need to keep this conversation going. But I'm so glad that we had a great conversation, a great connection, and are keeping the conversation going here today.
I know. I trauma dumped on you a little bit.
I love trauma dumping. Maybe that's not a good thing, but it makes me feel seen,
Yeah.
And I felt very seen when you brought up your book, and just feeling like someone who over not overcompensates, but just like I'm very high functioning. I'm always going, I'm always working, and I tend to like not feel my joy a lot. So when you talked about that, I was like, oh, okay, there's a lot there.
Well, writing this book made my high functioning depression peak again. Like I thought it was healed, but like nobody tells you that writing a book is so hard.
Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah, it's hard.
And listen, you wrote the whole thing. I had a ghostwriter, so you know what?
You know, the writing was fun. It's the marketing.
That's the hardest part. That's what I told you too when we talked about your publication launch. I was like, honestly, the harder part is like publication date and marketing and getting the word out. It's a lot of work.
And for me, as someone who struggles with perfection and like not failing, if the book doesn't do well, I'm like, well, I'll be a failure, which is crazy, right?
Yes.
I'm a shrink.
How many people have written a book and like have had something published? Very few.
Yeah. Well, that's what you told me, and that you were like my therapist for that afternoon.
Okay, come on.
I love the work that you do in the space of love. And tell me about some of the most challenging questions that you get asked by your followers about love.
Oh, wow. Well, you know, I always kind of just approach it from someone who's lived life and failed at love so that I can take my failures and like share them or give my perspective, because I've been in the trenches of being someone who's been in multiple, you know, long-term relationships and dated in New York City. And it's just, there's a lot there. I feel like it always does come into that idea of self-love, because I feel like that's the foundation of a good partner and a good partnership are two people that love themselves first and foremost. So I always feel like that's a big one. I'm sure you receive that a lot as well.
Yes, confidence is important. And your whole work, you know, motivating people every day to take care of their health, that translates into loving yourself.
Absolutely.
And how people treat you, right?
Absolutely. I always say this, like fitness is this great kind of like space where it's so much more than like burning calories or looking a certain way. Sure, those are going to be great results from that, you know, that's something to look forward to. But I think the thing that it really builds is like that resiliency and that mental toughness of realizing you can sit in really uncomfortable physical spaces and get through it. And then that is a massive practice for our own self-love, of knowing that we are strong enough, we're strong enough, we're resilient enough to sit through uncomfortable feelings, fear, pain, and that it will pass. And it just reminds you of how fucking like dope we are, you know?
Well, for me, you know, when it was like 2021, right after the pandemic, I was like, you know, I made it through the pandemic, got my lab through it, got my employees through it, got my daughter through it, and then boom, divorce. And I was just like, okay, I'm a failure. And I was like, wait a second, this is not right. I have to reframe, discuss it with my therapist. And we ended up focusing on things that I can control and going to the gym, working out, lifting.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I could not have gone through divorce without that, because it was something that made me feel physically better.
Yeah.
And I hadn't looked that good in years.
Hey.
A good breakup will do it.
Yeah.
Right?
There's nothing like a breakup to get that body together.
Yes. But the gym was the one thing that I was like, okay, every day I can do it. It's a routine. I have control over it. I feel good. Like the endorphins get released, right? And the outcome, it lasts, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, it was really something that helped me. And I had a trainer who I still work with. Like I work with my trainer from like even before my daughter was born to now. And you know, that was like my steady go-to person, right? So I think there's so much tied into mental health and motivation and fitness.
Yeah.
And what are the top 3 things that anyone listening to this can do to improve their mental health through fitness?
Oh, I love that. Well, I think first and foremost, like get started. Like you need to move your body. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to look like someone else's routine. But if you can find something that you really enjoy, or at least find that gateway to something you enjoy. So I always say like, If you're really into like dancing, like take a dance cardio class. If you are taking a Peloton ride and you might be scared of it, like find an instructor that plays the kind of music that you like, so you know that there's going to be some sort of joy or happiness in that space that's going to like hook you and make you feel good, even if you're not sure, so confident about working out or don't know what it's going to feel like. Like find the thing that like is going to bring you joy. And once that becomes a habit, a routine in your life, then you can start to venture out into things that are, I don't want to say not as enjoyable, but maybe more challenging, or like finding something new, a new way to move your body is a really great way to go. I also say like, don't be so hard on yourself when you fall down or you take breaks. Everyone's like, what do you do? You know, what do you do when you don't feel like working out? Like, do you always feel like working out? The answer is no. I don't always feel like working out. It helps that there's a paycheck in front of me that I can do that. But even on my own personal workouts, it's like, give yourself those days where even if you've been in the routine and the habit, it's like, if you're having a day off and you don't feel like it today, it's okay. Like missing 1 day, 2 days is not going to completely change your results, your path, your progress. Like it's okay to take those breaks. And honestly, it might give you the energy that you need to come back at it even harder, stronger, better, more in tune with what you really need. And like enjoy the journey. Like Miley Cyrus, enjoy the climb, you know? I know there's this like people, I hate when people say they hate to work out. I just feel like you haven't found the thing that brings you joy in it. Once you build that habit, you feel so good, like physically, mentally, emotionally. And it's so interesting. And I mean, you know this, like how connected those things are. When you feel physically good about yourself, then you are going to think good things about yourself, and then you're going to feel like the joy, the emotions that you want to feel. So
that's the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that your relationships are the number one predictor of your health, your longevity, your happiness. So if you're partnered with someone toxic, it doesn't matter how many weights you lift or how far you run, your body's suffering. What are 3 things people should do if they're partnered with someone who is toxic?
Oh, wow. Well, leave. Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, call them out on their bullshit. You know, like if you see someone exhibiting those traits or lashing out at you, like making you feel a type of way, I think it's really good to communicate like, hey, you said this and it made me feel this way. So calling out their bullshit, you know, I think something that we talked about on my podcast was, if you are feeling certain things, it's good to loop them in on the vulnerability, you know, sharing what you're going through, and especially sooner than later, so that they feel like you trust them and they can trust you. And hopefully they do. And so they're going to lean in and say like, hey, like I am feeling this type of way, or I'm going through this, and you guys can work through it together. And maybe some of that toxicity will kind of work itself out. But if they continue to be an ass, I do repeat, go to number 1. Like, it's time to leave, babe. You know?
Yeah. If you're not sleeping, if you can't eat, if your body's getting sick and you're with this person, your body's trying to tell you something, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always easy because some people are in really, you know, financially toxic relationships where they're dependent on the person, or there's violence involved. So don't do it alone. Talk to someone.
Yeah. It's crazy how like our bodies will give us those signs and we will continuously ignore them over and over again.
Like your hair falling out, don't ignore it.
Oh my goodness. Hair falling out. Wow. Okay. I'm sure you have so many stories of clients who will continue to hold on even though it's hurting them.
Yeah, it's not easy. And don't feel so bad about yourself if, let's say, you can't say goodbye, right? Because there used to be this like idea that we should all be okay on our own. Every person's an island. But we know the science doesn't show that. You know, like when we attach to someone, our biochemistry changes when they enter the room. So like if you can't say goodbye to someone who's not good for you, don't beat yourself up. It takes time, right? Because you're literally physically connected to them by biochemistry. Right?
Yeah.
So give yourself time and grace, but also realize that you're worthy enough. I was on your podcast to talk about my book, right? And I always ask my guests who are experts to, talk about a time in life when you were struggling on the inside, but on the outside, everything looked great. People were like, oh my gosh, you're crushing it. You knew that you were struggling. And how did you get through it?
Well, I think this is how we very much connected. And I would, to be vulnerable, I feel like I'm feeling a little bit of this right now. The past month has been hard on me I don't know why, to be honest. My workload is pretty light, but I feel like a sense of apathy, or feel like I can't move through with the quickness or the inspiration that I typically do. And I'm giving myself kind of the time to feel it. But I think when I really felt this the hardest was probably January, February, the winter of 2022. So it was the winter that I just gotten done with doing Dancing with the Stars. And then all of these brand deals were coming in, all of these opportunities were coming in. I didn't want to pass them up. So I kind of went into that high functioning space of just next thing, next opportunity, next job, next paycheck, go, 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 go. And I feel like part of my ego felt good because I'm getting all this success. But then, we talked about before, is but I wasn't feeling the joy of it. Or I wasn't feeling joy unless I knew the next opportunity was coming my way. And it probably took me until that summer to be able to pump the brakes and focus on myself. And when I think of focusing on myself, it's always about, I kind of come back to a few things. And one most important thing is really connecting with friends. That is so, so important to me. And I know we have adult lives that we all have so many different things. And especially, living in New York City, if you don't live in the same fucking neighborhood, it's hard to see somebody. If someone's in a different borough, it's so challenging. But really reaching out, finding time that everyone's free, and be an adult about it and put in the calendar, and make the dinner reservations, make sure you do that. And also starting to say no. And not having to say yes to every single opportunity, and trusting that you've created a foundation for yourself of success in whatever you do, that the next opportunity is going to come to you when it's right. And sometimes the time is right. It is not right now. And the time is just to chill and take care of yourself, be with friends, do things that make you happy, and allow you to actually feel the joy. And especially as a New Yorker, I feel like getting outside is so rare.
Yes, it is.
So when summer hits, or when you can be in warmer climate, being outside really, really helps. So I feel like that's a lot of stuff that helped me. But like I said, I feel like those sort of feelings and my own relationship with burnout, it tends to ebb and flow. It's never completely... It goes away, but then it also comes back because I forget my own boundaries, or I forget to take care of myself. And then you have to tap into that toolbox again and give yourself a little space.
It's so powerful when people like you talk about this, because on the outside, you're doing so many wonderful things. Yeah. You've written a book. You've been on Dancing with the Stars, my daughter's favorite show. You're someone people look up to, and so when you're vulnerable, it helps the rest of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like we kind of romanticize these sort of picture perfect Instagrammable lifestyles, especially us millennials. And we forget that there's human beings behind the pictures that have struggles, and that is life is great, but it's also not easy.
No, it's not.
And nobody's alone in that struggle. It's not the same. We don't all have the same struggles, but we're all going through something.
Yeah, check on your strong friends.
Yeah.
Where can we follow you? Where can we find you?
At Cody Rigsby on Instagram and TikTok. And of course, you can give me a listen on my podcast with Andrew Chappelle at Tactful Pettiness.
Thank you so much. I'm so
Thanks
glad
for having
that I met
me in
you.
the vault.
Yes, I'm so glad you let me trauma dump on you.
Yes, and good luck with the book. Can't wait to read it in full.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Make sure that you subscribe. When you subscribe, it helps me to continue to deliver this mental health information for free.
to millions of listeners. So please support my mission. Please pick up my book, High Functioning, and let's build a happier life together.